Okay, today we're going to talk about who do you love? And I don't mean your family or significant other. I mean, who do you love working with? Is there a special group of people or type of people out there that you enjoy spending your time with? So look at where you work as a nurse. Do you like that population that you're working with? I spent 20 years working with neuropatients, and I really enjoyed working with neuropatients, and I would be happy to start a business to help those patients to achieve something. And in fact, that's exactly what I did. My first business was called Coordinated Care, and it provided transitional care to neuropatients going from the hospital to home. The group you love doesn't have to be the group that you work with. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something that's a little more personal. So for instance, I have a student who has a medically fragile child, and she enjoys helping parents to find alternatives to the traditional medicine that they can get from the doctor to supplement and support their kids. So she does some more natural stuff. And I have another student who has PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and she works with women helping them to deal with their symptoms. So the point is they enjoy working with who they work with, and it makes their lives and their businesses much easier to run. Now, neither one of them came to me and said that was the population that they wanted to start with. It was something that we discovered was inside of them going through this process. And when they realized that there was a business model in what they knew and who they loved helping, they finally understood why we stress that entrepreneurialism, it's a service and it's not a means to make money per se. The money is a side effect of doing what you love and helping others. It just comes. Now, there'll be a couple pointers here because I don't want you to say you love working with all women or men or all the people in the world, because that's just not going to work. In order to pick a group who you like to work with or who you love working with, there have to be some general guidelines because nothing is absolute. But these guidelines are pretty close. So listen up. Tip number 1, choose a group of people who you like. I know that sounds obvious, but don't work with kids because you think that's where the money is. I have this conversation all the time. The nurse will say to me, you know, I want to work with this group, but I think I'll make more money if I work with that group. And that might be true. It might be true, but it will be infinitely harder to work with a group that you aren't passionate about. Tip number 2, make sure the group that you choose has a coalescing framework. Okay, what in the world do I mean by this, right? Your group has to self-select an identity. For instance, if you want to work with polycystic ovarian syndrome teens and your group is called PCOS teens, then we know who that group is for. Teenagers with PCOS will identify as a PCOS teen and everyone else will be repelled. There's not going to be random men and women in this group without PCOS. Now, contrast this with women with chronic diseases. Chronic diseases is not something people identify with. It's something we have, but it's just too broad. I mean, this could be all over the spectrum, from babies to centurions. Most people don't walk around and say, I have chronic diseases and bond with somebody else who has a chronic disease. It's just in general, because most of us have some sort of chronic disease of some kind. There's just nothing special about it, if you will. And this is where niching down is the right thing to do, but nurses don't want to do it because they're afraid of losing an audience. But what I can tell you is that your business on chronic diseases will likely never really get off the ground. So if you want to level the playing field on the internet, you need to be specific, and what you think is specific may need to be niched down even further. So let's say you choose something more specific, such as lupus, which is a great topic, right? People who have lupus will self-identify and they'll be interested in the topic of talking about lupus. This is what we would call a coalescing framework and a self-identifiable condition. Tip 3, if your group is dominated by a major guru in the space, then niche down. That's all you have to do. But it's really important to do because one of the most intimidating aspects of starting a business is seeing people who are like light years ahead of you. And I mean, how are you going to compete with, let's say, Tony Robbins in the motivational space? I mean, the answer is you're not. You're not going to compete with Tony Robbins. You're not going to compete with Amazon. You just don't. I mean, that's a recipe for bankruptcy from the get-go. What you do is slice off a piece of the pie. So Tony Robbins can't be everything to everybody. There is a sub-niche of his audience that doesn't get the attention that they want. And maybe you want to be the Tony Robbins for people with lupus. Maybe there is someone in that space already who's very popular. And if so, then you can niche down even further. So what about being the guru for teens with lupus or corporate women with lupus? This becomes your starting point. And this is where your audience will give you the boost that you need to someday compete with Tony Robbins, just not in the startup phase, okay? In the startup phase, you need to just start. So slice off a piece of the pie and start with that group, very niched. Tip number 4, make sure your audience has money to pay for services. This also might seem obvious, but I've had a lot of nurses who want to help homeless people or people on Medicaid or people with no disposable income. And this is wonderful. It's great. It's what I love about nurses, but those people are not your audience. They may be the recipient of your business, but if they're not paying, they're not the audience. So know the difference between a recipient and an audience. If you want to help homeless people, who will pay for your services to help them? That is your audience, and you gotta like them, okay? So maybe you're going after wealthy donors or policymakers or NGOs, whoever it is, just be aware of who the audience really is. And the same goes for kids. Kids aren't paying you, okay? Their parents or guardians will be paying you, so you must appeal to them and make sure you like working with the audience, and in this case, not the recipients. Tip number 5, make sure you have access to this audience. If you don't have access to the people that you want to work with, you either have to start building those relationships now, which can take a lot of time, which is okay as well. Just, you got to start somewhere, or you need to find an audience with whom you already have credibility with and access to. All right, so the assignment for today is 2-part. First, I need you to figure out who your audience is going to be. Who is that person? Who is the group that you want to work with? Make a list of those people that you enjoy working with, and make sure there's some sort of Facebook group or something out there for this audience. So if there's a Facebook group, if there's not a Facebook group, you're in trouble. If there is a Facebook group, you might need to still niche down, but you're on a good track. All right, second thing I want you to do is to join as many of those groups as you can online, and just start listening to them. Because in the next video, we're going to start looking for the problem.